Today we're going to talk about solving one-step equations. So that's what's going in your table of contents. It says, I can solve one-step equations with one variable. I love these too. I love this whole unit of expressions and equations. They're like my favorite part of math. So I really hope that you're understanding it and enjoying this as much as I am. So what are one-step equations? One-step equations means that there is only one step in order to solve for the variable. Remember, the variable is that unknown. So the x's and the y's and the a's and the b's, okay? So whenever you see a letter, it is a variable, the unknown number that we just don't know yet. So today what we're going to be doing is finding out what that unknown number is. And the way to do that is to do inverse operations. Inverse means opposite. Okay, so if I had addition, what's the opposite of addition? Well, I hope that you were able to say subtraction. How about if I had multiplication? What's the opposite or inverse operation? Remember, operations is add, subtract, multiply, divide, okay? What's the opposite inverse operation of multiplication? Well, it's division. Now, how about, we talked about this in another unit, flipping fractions. So if I had 1 over a, what would be the inverse operation? Well, I would flip it. So it would just be a. Because if I flipped this, it would be a over 1. And a over 1 is the same as just saying a. So if I had 9 over 1, it's the same as just saying 9. 1 goes into 9 times. Okay, so let's practice some of these. Use inverse operations to solve for the variables. So if you look at this first one, it says x plus 21 equals -8. Well, bummer, I don't know what x is. I want to know what it is so I can answer this problem. So I'm going to do the inverse. Over here, I want to get x by itself. X equals something, so I know what x is. So let's go ahead. We're going to do the inverse operation of plus or positive. It is subtraction. So I'm going to move everything over to the other side. And the only way to do that is think of this as like a wall at your equal sign. The only way to do this is if I take it from one side, I must do the same thing to the other side. So a positive 21 minus 21, hopefully remember that brings you to 0. So I'm just going to cross that out because it's like a little 0 there, and we don't need to put it. I'm going to bring down all that's left, which is the x, bring down my equal sign, and what's going to go on the other side? -8 minus 21. The rule says that I keep it negative and I add them together to get 29. Let's check our work and see if we get it right. So what this is saying, whenever we see an x, we should be putting a -29. So I'm going to change the x to a -29 plus 21 equals -8. -29 plus 21. I'm going to take the sign of the larger number, which is 29, so it's negative. And I'm going to subtract them. 29 minus 21 is -8 equals -8. Yep, it worked. We're good there. Let's try this one. So what's the inverse of subtraction? We want x by itself. Well, the inverse operation of subtraction is addition. So I'm going to add 3 to both sides. That's so important. Don't forget to add to both sides. Sometimes people forget that they have to, if they're going to take it from here, they got to put it over here. So make sure you're doing the same thing. Whatever you do to one side, you must do the other. Just the same as fractions. If you're simplifying fractions, whatever you do to the denominator, you must do to the numerator. It's just the same thing, just written a little differently. A -3 plus 3 brings me to 0, so those are gone. All I have left on this side is x. 12 plus 3 is 15. So that one we got done. So let's see if we're right. Instead of x, we're going to put a 15. So 15 minus 3 equals 12. 15 minus 3 is 12 equals 12. Yes, good. We got that one. Let's try another one. Oh my goodness, this one they're trying to trick us a little bit. 4x. What does that mean when we don't have an operation between? Because here we had an addition sign, here we had a subtraction sign. There's nothing between these two. Well, I hope you remember that when you have a number and a variable next to each other, it means that you are multiplying. So this is the same as saying 4 times x. Okay, so that's the same thing. What's the inverse operation of multiply? It's divide. Now, remember how I told you that a fraction bar is the same as division. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put my division symbol. And what do I want to move to the other side to get x by itself? I only want to move the 4. So I'm going to divide by 4. I am not going to divide by 4x because then it would bring the x to the other side also, and that wouldn't help us at all. We want to leave x there and get everything else on the other side of the equal sign. What's 4 divided by 4? If you had a fraction that showed as 4 over 4, you would know it equals 1 whole. So those are gone. All that's left is 1x. That's what I want. 4 over 4 is 1. So x equals, and remember, if I'm dividing 4 on one side, I have to divide 4 on the other side. What's a negative 4 divided by a positive 4? Well, we already know 4 divided by 4 is 1, and it's a negative divided by a positive, so it should be a negative. So anytime I see x, I should have a negative 1. So let's go ahead and try that. 4, and instead of x, I'm going to put a negative 1. Remember, if I have parentheses, it means multiplying. We want to get rid of using an x for a multiplication symbol because look at all these x's everywhere. It could get confusing. Equals negative 4. What's 4 times a negative 1? It's negative 4 equals negative 4. Yeah, that one worked. We got it. Okay, let's look at this one. Right now it's dividing. X divided by 7. So the inverse would be multiplying by the letter. So I don't want to move the x. I want to leave it there. So I'm going to multiply by the 7. Because remember, the opposite of division is multiplication. And the opposite of a fraction would be bringing it up next to it. Okay, so 7 over 7 there. Those can cancel. And we're going to multiply by 7 there. Okay, so those kind of go away. It's like, I said multiply. It's like dividing. So 7 divided by 7. And you're leaving 1x left. Now, negative 5 times the 7 is negative 35. Okay, so it's 7 over 7. It's kind of like the 7 is being multiplied with the x. And if it's up on top of the fraction bar, 7 divided by 7 is 1x. So let me do that again. Let me make sure that you guys understand this. I got a little bit of a confusion there, all right? So what you're doing is you're multiplying by the 7, but you're multiplying it to the x. But remember, if it's a big 7 there, it's the same thing because it's still a numerator. So 7 divided by 7, those can cancel to be 1x. So that's why it's an x equals negative 35. So now instead of putting an x, let's do a negative 35 divided by 7 equals negative 5. What's negative 35 divided by 7? Well, 7 goes into 35 5 times, and it's negative, and it equals negative 5. So that one worked. All right, important note, do not forget to balance the equations. You must do the same operation on both sides of the equation. That's what I was talking about. Whatever you do to one side, you must do to the other, okay? All right, so let's look at our practice and make sure that we don't have anything kind of surprising going on there. So on number 1, you should be okay with that one. Let's see, number 2, it looks like a variable is touching a number. I hope you remember what operation that means so that you can find the inverse operation. This one's a little confusing on this one, so I'm going to help you get used to this one. When you see a fraction, okay, it's dividing, so you are going to multiply by the inverse. Multiplying by the inverse of -1/2, so 1/2, and you're going to multiply by 2 over 1. You're flipping it and multiplying. What's 1 times 2? Well, hopefully you got 2. And what's 2 times 1? 2. And remember, it's a negative. So what do we know when the numerator and denominator is the same? It's a 1 whole. So what you've got is an x, and it's a negative because this was a -1. So what did you do to this side? You do need to do to this side. So we multiplied by that 1/2, we multiplied it by 2 over 1, or just 2. So you should be multiplying this side by 2 just like you multiplied this side by 2, because remember, you're flipping it and multiplying the inverse. So go ahead and try to finish those.